LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 19th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Did that say billion? It should have said million. I thought I fixed that at the last minute, but thanks for joining me. And this is my cat Chong, who also thanks you for joining us. He's purring. I don't know if you can hear it over the microphone, but we will be using the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which it should be really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you should see from the title, my topic is Trump's legal troubles worsen with $350+ million business fraud verdict. And that's what most of my clips will center on. But if you want to see what each clip is about, down in the video description, I put short summaries of all 13 clips. And I actually have two clips that are sort of on the main topic for political comedy, because the $500 million, if you add in the 350 something verdict, and then there was like another 100 million in interest, and then you've got like the 80 something and 5 million for E. Jean Carroll, in those two cases, you're like at $500 million, right? So he's lost that in civil damages already, just in the last year. So he always seems to be looking for a way to raise money, including selling these really ugly $399 sneakers that you can see Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, discuss and then make his own joke about on the MSNBC show The Weekend over in this clip.
We were talking more about Trump's newest venture, of course, those hideous-looking sneakers that he's out hawking in order to go raise some money. You know, I was up at about 4 o'clock this morning, and I came up with an entire campaign. I have decided my next chapter of my life, I want to be like Mad Men. I want to go into advertising. Donald, in his mind, actually thinks he's a combination of like Michael Jordan, my old client Kanye, or Off-White, all smashed into one grifter, right? So those we're going to call, just so you guys hear it from me first, the hair felons. I'm telling you, it's the right name for it.
Actually, I don't know, not that great a joke. Hair felons. I think he said hair felons, not even air felons. Air felons might be better, but... And then he made some joke about Trump, endorsing something he knows about, like adult diapers, which even seemed a little mean to me. But I don't know. I've never been a big fan of Michael Cohen, and he comes from that Trump world where they tend to have like a really mean sense of humor. Trump, of course, has a really mean sense of humor. Most of his jokes have to do with like demeaning somebody or making somebody the other. And anyway, that's a whole different topic. But those sneakers, those are really ugly. I don't know who would buy them, but apparently they sold out at the sneaker conference in Philadelphia, where Trump was both cheered and booed. They showed it on Fox News, like just with the cheering, I think. But that's not the clip I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this is comedy. The second clip is political comedy, because they discuss the sneakers on the big weekend show on Fox News on Sunday. And they have this guy, Raymond Arroyo, who at first I thought he was like the whitest guy ever or whatever, but it turns out his father emigrated from Central America and his last name's Arroyo. So I guess he's not the whitest guy ever, but I don't think he has the insight into the black community that he is professing to have. Well, you tell me what you think about this next clip, the analysis on Fox News about the $399 sneakers over here.
Every time they try to say Trump, they try to stop him at a trial, or they try to throw all of this, sludge at him, he somehow survives, which must drive his opponents crazy, because even the sneaker thing, I was on social media last night. Very interesting, as you see black support eroding from Joe Biden. This is connecting with Black America because they love sneakers. They're into sneakers. They love this is a big deal, certainly in the inner city. So when you have Trump roll out his sneaker line, they're like, wait a minute, this is cool. He's reaching them on a level that defies and is above politics. The culture always trumps politics. And Trump understands culture like no politician I've ever seen.
I don't know. I mean, I can't claim to speak for the Black community, and especially in the inner city. That was the part I found most cringy there. But that analysis does not seem like really how Trump's sneakers are going to affect his standing in the Black community. But I don't know. Maybe someone with more expertise than I have can give a contrary point of view in the comments if you want to, but I just found that analysis amusing, in some ways like more amusing than Michael Cohen's attempt at a joke there, which didn't really get much laughs from the panel either, I noticed. But anyway, those are the two political comedy clips that, like I said, are sort of related to the main topic of the $350+ million verdict that Trump suffered in a New York court, finding he engaged in years of business fraud, inflating his assets to get better loan terms and lower interest rates, better loan terms with lower interest rates that, people say there are no victims. Well, he could have paid higher interest rates, and he took up a whole bunch of money that could have been lent to other people who he qualified over for the lending because he lied about his assets. So it's not completely victimless, and of course it's not a crime. It's just a civil judgment against his business. But anyway, you're going to see it covered to some extent or another in most of these news summaries. Not Fox News Sunday, of course, but that's not really a news summary, is it? But actually the best news summary of the week, I think, is the longest one, NBC News Meet the Press, because they just covered like 5 different topics. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning. We are 1 week out from the South Carolina Republican primary. But this week, the frontrunner, former President Trump, was on defense. His legal battles growing, Biden impeachment efforts suffering a setback, and mounting concerns about how he would confront Vladimir Putin if he's reelected. On Friday, the former president faced a stunning legal and financial defeat. A judge in New York ordered him to pay a massive $355 million penalty, an amount which could rise to more than $450 million with interest. The ruling also bars Trump from personally running a business in New York for 3 years.
The judges and prosecutors that were dealing with me are essentially all the same, different wrappings, tone, manner, but always the same.
The blow to Trump's business comes after the special counsel investigating Hunter Biden charged a former informant at the center of the impeachment case against President Biden with lying to the FBI. Leading House Republicans had repeatedly pointed to intelligence from that informant as central to their case for impeaching the president.
Even a trusted FBI informant has alleged a bribe to the Biden family.
Who's one of our most trusted, highest paid, most credible FBI informants.
That to me is really the heart of this matter. The most corroborating evidence we have is that 1023 form from this highly credible, confidential human source.
An FBI informant at the center of the impeachment inquiry into you has been indicted for allegedly lying. Your reaction to that, and should the inquiry be dropped?
He is lying, and it should be dropped, and it's just been an outrageous effort from the beginning.
Now, all of that comes against mounting tensions with Russia. Ukrainian troops were forced to withdraw from a key town on the Eastern Front, the highest profile retreat by Ukrainian forces in months. Ukraine aid appears stalled on Capitol Hill. This week, the Senate passed a foreign aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, but so far that appears to have no path in the House.
But it's about time they step up, don't you think? Instead of going on a 2-week vacation. 2 weeks, they're walking away. 2 weeks. The idea we need anything more to get to Ukraine aid. I mean, this is, In light of a former president's statement that saying Russia, if they haven't paid the dues to us, go get them. Come on.
On Friday, Russian authorities announced that opposition leader Alex Navalny, Putin's fiercest critic, had died at a penal colony in Siberia where he was being held. Ukrainian President Zelensky pleaded for more help.
After the murder of Alexei Navalny, it's absurd to perceive Putin as a supposedly legitimate head of a Russian state. And he is a thug who maintains power through corruption and violence.
House Intelligence Chairman Republican Mike Turner caused a stir on Capitol Hill this week after he issued an extraordinary statement calling on the White House to declassify information about an unnamed, quote, serious national security threat. The new intelligence, now public, indicates that Russia is moving closer to developing an anti-satellite weapon for use in space that would have the ability to destroy U.S. satellites. Late Saturday, I spoke with Chairman Turner from Munich, where he has been meeting with European allies.
And I will have a clip of Representative Mike Turner, but more him talking about Trump's legal troubles, not this whole Russian satellite that can, nuclear powered satellite that can take out other satellites, or exactly what it is not been completely explained. But like I said, I think that was just the best news summary because it covered a lot of different topics that were important from the last week. The $350+ million verdict against Trump, the witness against the FBI informant that said that Biden took a $5 million bribe over Burisma. That guy was charged with the Trump-appointed special counsel with lying to the FBI. That was good news for Biden. The Ukraine and foreign aid bill stalled in Congress. Alexei Navalny dying in the Russian prison. And then the whole Mike Turner national security thing I was talking about at the beginning, because Mike Turner is actually their guest. And so, of course, they focus on that. But it was like a weird story. But that was like all the stories. The rest of the news summaries aren't going to cover them all that well. Like ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Jonathan. And this one's only, 15 seconds shorter, but it's Alex Navalny dying in the Russian prison, the $350+ million verdict against Trump, and then the status of the Republican presidential primary because Nikki Haley's on the show. And I'll talk about that news summary a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning. Welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, reformers in Russia and friends of democracy and decency around the world are mourning the death of Alexei Navalny. In Moscow, braving the cold, the threat of arrest, and worse, mourners have been leaving flowers at the Wall of Grief. That's a memorial to the victims of Stalin's brutality. By last night, according to a Russian human rights group, more than 400 people in Russia were arrested as they honored the fallen symbol of the Russian opposition. Navalny is a man who stood up to Vladimir Putin for more than a decade, a man who survived 2 poisoning attempts, one that almost killed him, a man who returned to Russia even though he knew he would be putting his life in danger yet again, a man who continued to be the face of the Russian opposition, even from his jail cell at a prison colony inside the Arctic Circle. It's a story of courage and cowardice, the courage of Navalny and the cowardice of the Russian leader who feared him and seemingly cannot tolerate even those mourning his death. The day before he died, Navalny appeared in court laughing and joking, even as he was handed yet another punishment of solitary confinement. His widow took to the world stage in Munich before going to grieve with her family, saying Putin would bear responsibility and calling on global leaders to defeat his regime. President Biden laid blame for Navalny's death squarely on Putin, and he urged Congress to approve more aid to Ukraine in its war against Moscow. The leading contender for the Republican nomination opposes that aid. And as of this moment, he has not said a single word about Navalny's death. Donald Trump's focus instead has been on a threat closer to home. the mounting legal threat he faces as he solidifies his control once again over the Republican Party. The latest blow came Friday afternoon in the civil fraud case against his company. Trump must now pay $355 million plus approximately $100 million in interest, and he is barred from running his company in New York for 3 years. The case strikes at the heart of his carefully crafted image as a super rich and wildly successful real estate developer. The presiding judge concluding, quote, "The frauds found here leap off the page and shock the conscience." Trump has vowed to appeal, but the day after he was hit with that $355 million judgment, he was in Pennsylvania hawking merchandise. $399 Trump golden sneakers, $99 Victory 47 fragrances, and more at an event called SneakerCon. Yes, just yesterday, the Republican frontrunner was selling merchandise at SneakerCon. None of this has diminished Trump's standing in the Republican Party. But with 6 days until the next big test in South Carolina, the race is not yet over. Fewer than 4% of the delegates needed to capture the nomination have been chosen. Although with Super Tuesday on the horizon just 10 days after South Carolina, time is running out for his last remaining Republican opponent, Nikki Haley, to close the gap. And that's where we start this morning with Governor Nikki Haley.
So there you go. I pretty much already talked about the contents of this clip juxtaposed to the Meet the Press clip or news summary, where I thought Meet the Press covered more stories, but after watching it, you see ABC, they did a much more in-depth dive into the death of Alex Navalny and his history. They also talked about the Trump sneakers, which I guess Meet the Press did not mention the Trump sneakers, although I showed MSNBC covering it earlier that morning with Michael Cohen. But I don't know if the sneakers were top story. The next news summary is, of course, not that journalistic because it comes from Fox News Sunday. They don't focus on they like barely mention the verdict against Trump in the teaser before the news, and then they don't mention it. Shannon Bream never brings it up in any of her interviews. I'm going to show you, even though she's talking to Tim Scott, who is looking to be Donald Trump's vice president and has endorsed him. Senator Tim Scott never asked him about it, although one of the actual journalists never asked him about it either. I have to go look at my notes again. When I get to the Tim Scott clip, I will. Over on CBS News Face the Nation, Robert Costa did ask some good questions to Tim, or at least asked Tim Scott about it, but did not ask him in a good way, as I'll talk about when I get to that clip. But he went through 2 other interviews, including one with Shannon Bream, without being asked about the big judgment against Trump or any of his legal cases or legal troubles. But I'm getting ahead of myself here on this Fox News Sunday news summary. It's Shannon Bream and Lucas Tomlinson not mentioning the $350+ million verdict against Trump, but talking about the foreign policy clash between Trump and Biden on, whether foreign aid should be aid or loans. And they do actually mention Trump's comment that we shouldn't defend NATO allies if they don't pay their dues or whatever, but they don't point out ever that, you don't pay dues to NATO. What NATO allies are supposed to do is spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. And of course, the U.S. spends a lot more than that, but it's not like they're supposed to be paying their dues or paying their bill, which, well, you'll see Shannon Bream doesn't point that out in her summary of the foreign policy clash here, and Lucas Tomlinson doesn't. And Then they talk a little bit about the Republican presidential primary. But anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. We begin with starkly different visions for America's foreign policy from the two frontrunners in the 2024 presidential race. President Biden slamming Congress for being out on recess without passing wartime aid to Israel and Ukraine, and denouncing, quote, the previous president for recent remarks saying he wouldn't come to the aid of any NATO country that wasn't up to date with payments to the alliance. Former President Trump calling Biden's foreign policy weak, while suggesting any new aid for Ukraine should be approved as a loan and not direct cash payments. In a moment, we'll get reaction from both sides of the aisle. Democratic Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, who supports the president's reelection, and South Carolina Republican Senator Tim Scott, who is backing President Trump. But first, let's turn to Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson, who is live on the ground in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, Ukrainian forces have retreated from a city in the east, giving Russia its biggest victory in months. President Biden blames Congress for the loss.
I'm going to fight till we get them the ammunition they need.
President Biden voiced his outrage over House Republicans refusing to vote on the Senate's $95 billion aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. A bipartisan alternative has been introduced, which includes funding for the southern border. Days before the 2-year anniversary of Russia launching its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there's growing concern in Washington about Russia launching something else, a nuclear warhead into orbit.
What we're discussing is a Russian anti-satellite weapon.
It's something we have to address seriously and on an immediate basis.
At the Munich Security Conference, where in 2007 Russian President Vladimir Putin warned the West about his future intentions, Secretary of State Antony Blinken huddled with his Chinese and Indian counterparts to warn them Russia's new weapon threatens their satellites, GPS, and communication systems too. Former President Donald Trump rattled NATO allies when he said the U.S. might not defend the alliance if Russia attacks.
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Biden defended the 75-year-old military alliance.
NATO is critical to our survival. The idea that we're going to let NATO begin to split is totally against the interests of the United States of America.
Biden spoke to reporters here in Rehoboth Beach yesterday, where he reiterated he blames Putin for the death of Alex Navalny and said it cannot be tolerated. Shannon?
Lucas Tomlinson in Rehoboth Beach. Lucas, thank you. Joining us now, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet.
And notice they don't mention that Trump has never mentioned the death of Alex Navalny, and the rest of that news summary was biased in the way I was describing before I showed it. But I also, with one of the things I'd noticed and forgot to mention is when they talk about the foreign aid stuff going through Congress, they talked about the Senate bill that is dead in the House, but then there's also a bipartisan bill in the House. Well, wasn't the Senate bill bipartisan? And the bipartisan House bill also has border security in it. Well, there was a whole, they never talk about how Trump killed the foreign aid / border security bill that Republicans, including conservative Republican Jim Lankford in the Senate, negotiated for 4 months, and Republicans basically got almost everything they wanted, like the best bill they're ever going to get. And then, well, I talked about that a few weeks ago, but that, of course, never made it into that Fox News Sunday summary, even though news summary, even though it was supposedly talking about the politics of Congress and Trump versus Biden on foreign policy, and they throw in the immigration bill, but don't really talk about Trump's role in that whole process. And anyway, the next two news summaries are shorter. The CNN State of the Union one is just over a minute, and then CBS News Face the Nation is under a minute. The CNN, they talk about Alex Navalny dying in prison and Trump undermining NATO, and Republicans being okay with it because Jake Tapper has Liz Cheney on to talk about it, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that brief clip together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is reeling from the death of Russian dissident Alexei Navalny. Only 47 years old, Navalny appeared in good health and reasonably good spirits in the Siberian penal colony where he'd been held on bogus charges in Putin's Russia. And yet somehow, on Friday, the world learned that the pro-democracy, anti-corruption activist was dead. Putin is being blamed for the death by President Biden, Governor Nikki Haley, and so many other Western leaders. And yet, Donald Trump has had nothing specific to say about this. This after Trump told the South Carolina crowd last Saturday that as president, he had told a NATO ally that he would encourage Russia to do, quote, whatever the hell they want, unquote, to any NATO country that does not spend enough on its own defense. Trump's last remaining Republican challenger, Nikki Haley, says of Trump, we, quote, we cannot have a president who sides with murderous thugs who want to destroy America, unquote. Yet Trump looks poised to easily defeat her in her home state of South Carolina this Saturday. And despite a bipartisan gathering of American leaders who tried to reassure allies overseas this weekend about the U.S. commitment to countering Russia in Ukraine, the Republican Party that Trump has remade in his image seems largely on board with the strategy of poking NATO allies and petting the bear. Joining us now to discuss, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
That Liz Cheney interview was just a little bit too softball, and I'm going to show you kind of this weird softball question about Trump's legal troubles but I'll get to that when I get to the newsmaker clips. I want to finish up the news summaries. I would just say that CNN State of the Union news summary pretty much had like all the things that were missing from the Fox News Sunday news summary on the same topic. They talked to Jake Tapper said Trump never said anything about Alexei Navalny, and also how Nikki Haley was going after him for being like pro-Putin in a lot of ways, and especially his remarks on NATO that were spun a little bit differently about making NATO pay their bill, NATO countries pay their bill to NATO, which isn't even how NATO works, and they didn't mention that. But anyway, the final news summary is under a minute. CBS News Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan's off. Robert Costa is in instead, and you'll see it's just a brief news summary, basically on the problems in Congress passing the foreign aid bill. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Together Over Here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Margaret is off today. Congress is on a 2-week recess, but there is an urgent push among some lawmakers to do more to fund Ukraine. This weekend, another major Ukrainian city fell to Russian forces. And at an annual security conference in Munich, President Zelensky pleaded for more help from the U.S. and from allies around the world.
Do not ask Ukraine when the war will end. Ask yourself, why is Putin still able to continue it?
But the path forward for more U.S. aid remains uncertain. Last week, the Senate passed a $95 billion foreign aid bill that included money for Ukraine, Israel, and more. But the GOP-controlled House is not expected to take up that measure. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who opposed the
And I don't have a Lindsey Graham clip because Robert Costa didn't ask Lindsey Graham about the legal cases against Trump. He was the only one who had Senator Tim Scott on and asked him about it. That I showed you, or I talked earlier about how Shannon Bream had Senator Tim Scott on as a proxy for Donald Trump or an endorser of Donald Trump. Never asked about the $350+ million verdict or any of the other legal troubles. But the other program that had Tim Scott on didn't ask him. CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper never asked him. That was kind of surprising. I was kind of disappointed in Jake Tapper for that. If you don't believe me, here in the live comments, here we go. In the live comments, here's the CNN State of the Union transcript. You can read the whole Tim Scott interview. Jake Tapper never asked him. And even you can see here when Robert Costa asked Tim Scott about Trump's, legal troubles, it's really vague. It's like the question is, Robert Costa asks Tim Scott if Nikki Haley is correct that it's a burden potentially for Republicans nationwide to have a standard bearer who's in the courtroom. I mean, talk about not giving any details. I mean, the real question is to ask him about, is it okay with you for Trump to be a business fraud, or should he be, can he lead the country when he is barred from doing business? And I think you'll see a question like that coming up for Mike Turner from Kristen Welker on NBC News Meet the Press. But this is the only one of the three people interviewing Tim Scott to even ask him, and it's not asked very well, as I will talk about a little more after we watch Robert Costa do some cross-examination of some of the things that Tim Scott says, but not really the details of Trump's civil fraud or crimes or civil liability for sexual abuse or any of that over in this
Former President Donald Trump has spent a lot of time in the courtroom in recent days, and his opponent, Nikki Haley, says that's a burden potentially for Republicans nationwide to have a standard bearer who's in the courtroom. Does she have a point?
She does not. Here's what we know without any question, that this has only exposed the two-tier justice system that many Americans fear. You have a justice system that hunts Republicans while protecting Democrats. Bob, one of the most compelling pieces of evidence towards this fact is Special Counsel Hur's report that said that absolutely without any question, Joe Biden mishandled classified sensitive material. At the same time, you have courts actually targeting and running after Republicans, not just, however, the former president, but whether it's pro-life activists or folks showing up at school board meetings being referred to by this Department of Justice as domestic terrorists. We have a two-tier justice system that is being exposed.
You talk about the Justice Department being weaponized, but that's a claim made without evidence here, that it's somehow being weaponized. You have to have intent when it comes to making that kind of claim.
Here's what we see. The Special Counsel Hur's report is crystal clear that the President of the United States is too old, his memory faulty, which makes him sympathetic for a jury, so they're not moving forward with charges. But the report is clear that he mishandled classified material. That report is crystal clear, Bob. I think we can agree on that.
The characterizations have been highly contested, and there was no charge included in that report. But when it comes to former President Trump, Senator Scott, do you believe the RNC, the Republican National Committee, should be involved in paying his legal expenses, which are mounting?
I can only tell you that without any question, when you look at the two-tier justice system that we have that I just reinforced, I think it's important for us to note that without any question, the American people are very concerned about how that would impact their lives. Their issues are very clear, by the way. The American people are more focused on their future than Donald Trump's past. What they're more focused on is making sure that our southern border is secured. We're looking at almost 10 million illegal crossings by the election. The American people aren't asking the questions about legal challenges. The American people are asking questions about economic challenges. They're not talking about legal challenges. They're talking about their challenges across a kitchen table.
And you were just in Eagle Pass with Senator Graham.
And actually, Robert Costa's next question there is whether something Tim Scott said about whether, or a question that he was asked by Jake Tapper as well, about whether he would certify the election if he was Trump's vice president. Mike Pence, Mike Pence certified the election on January 6th, and he, wouldn't do a hypothetical in the past or about the future, but stuck with his position that Mike Pence did the right thing in the past. And I don't know, that whole thing was not really that useful, but you saw that was kind of a weak question to start with. No specifics from Robert Costa talking to Senator Tim Scott. And then Senator Tim Scott was talking about how Biden's special counsel said these things and about Biden's, having memory problems. And, it was clear and we have to listen to that. And Robert Costa never asked, well, what about what the special counsel said about Trump? And first his handling of documents in Mar-a-Lago, and of course his actions on January 6th, and So yeah, no specifics about any of the legal cases against Trump from anyone interviewing Senator Tim Scott. The best you was from Robert Costa there, and it wasn't very good, like I said. It's a little bit better here. Like I was saying before I showed the clip, Kristen Welker on NBC News' Meet the Press talking to Representative Mike Turner. This is one of the questions near the end. Also asked about the FBI informant saying Biden took a $5 million bribe, who's been charged with lying to the FBI. That was before this clip. But then here, I think asks a good question about the $350+ million verdict against Trump and his businesses. Like, if he can't run a business, should he be able to run the country? And that's over here.
I do want to turn to Trump's legal battles. On Friday, a judge ordered him to pay more than $350 million in his civil fraud case and has barred him from running a business in New York for 3 years. Do you trust someone who isn't allowed to run his own business to run the country, Mr. Chairman?
Actually, I don't trust this court decision. Being a practicing lawyer in commercial transactions, I think the whole premise of the case, which all legal analysts have said is unusual, is not really justifiable. We'll have to see ultimately how the appeals run in this case. But I think if this case stands, it's going to be a threat to really just all businesses, including those who are currently operating in New York.
But as you know, Mr. Chairman, this is not the only time that Mr. Trump has been fined for his business practices. In 2019, he was ordered to pay $2 million amid revelations that his charity misused funds. He was ordered to pay fines in 2018 related to his now defunct university. Does that undercut his trustworthiness as a leader?
All of those issues were taken into consideration as the country elected him to president last time. And his record as president is what we really need to look at. Our country was stronger. Our economy was stronger. And I think our border certainly being secure is probably the most important issue that Americans are going to look at. The 8 million people who have gone across the border during the Biden administration is absolutely an invasion. This is something that President Trump had addressed. And the fact that President Biden reversed by executive orders those issues that have been put in place to protect our country are going to be important to voters.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, the border migration has been an issue for decades under Republican, Democratic presidents because there hasn't been comprehensive immigration reform. But let me ask you about something else, because the House is on recess for 2 weeks. You only have a handful of days to avert a government shutdown.
And so, yeah, then Kristen Welker moves on to the next subject there, the government shutdown. And it was a better question, and there was a little bit of follow-up there, but Representative Mike Turner got away with saying this thing like, if this verdict against Trump's business is allowed to stand, it's a threat against all businesses. And that deserves some sort of follow-up question, like, what you mean, like, if Trump's isn't allowed to commit business fraud, no businesses will be allowed to commit business fraud? Really? I mean, but actually that clip that I just showed, I think, is the cross-examination of the week. The best job of cross-examining someone during an interview, because there weren't really good. Most of the cross-examinations, at least on the topic that I'm showing you this week, were not very good. And Jake Tapper, who often wins the cross-examination of the week because he's actually a pretty good confrontational interviewer, did like a really softball interview with Liz Cheney. I don't know why exactly, but this topic came up, and you can hear like the question here for Liz Cheney is, Trump's got a lot of court cases, don't you think? And then sort of talking about how, Mitt Romney said someone who's been found liable for rape, that crosses a line for me. Aren't you surprised there aren't more Republicans who feel that way? And yeah, that was pretty much the tenor of the whole interview, but especially on this topic, it's almost like not even a question asked by Jake Tapper over in this clip.
Just in the last few days, a judge has ordered that Donald Trump and his organization pay a $355 million fine for fraud. This on top of $83 million that he's been ordered to pay to E. Jean Carroll, the writer who's accused him of sexual assault. He has to pay that for defamation. And we're just getting started with the court cases here. There's a lot more to come.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are so many pieces to this. I think with respect to E. Jean Carroll, people need to understand, and I think they ought to be asked, people who are supporting Donald Trump, what the jury found in that case is that, Donald Trump was guilty of committing sexual assault. Basically, that he actually had done what he said on the Access Hollywood tape he did. I mean, this is not something that's out of left field. And when you look at these cases and you look at the verdicts and the judgments, it's clear the common thread that runs through all of them is Donald Trump lack of willingness to abide by the law, lack of commitment to the truth, fundamental lack of character. And I think one of the things that is so troubling about this political season is the extent to which you've got, people that used to be good and honorable members of Congress, for example, who have simply apparently abandoned the need to actually elect people of character and honor, and instead are embracing him.
It's interesting also, as Senator Mitt Romney said the other day, something along the lines of, I'm not going to vote for somebody who's guilty of sexual assault.
Right.
That's a line for me.
Yeah.
It seems odd that would be so unique among current senators and members of the House that would be a line.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that anybody with a daughter, sister, a mother would be where Senator Romney is on that issue.
Senator...
Well, I don't know, doesn't everybody have a mother? I think that's like everybody. But yeah, I mean, you don't even have to currently have a daughter, sister, or mother, I think, to not want to vote for someone for president who's been found liable for rape or whatever. But that was still a pretty softball interview by Jake Tapper of Liz Cheney. I don't know what that's all about, but it actually went on for 2 segments and didn't get much more confrontational than that. It was more of a fawning interview, I would say. And I already put the link in the live comments to see the whole transcript. You can read the whole interview between Jake Tapper and Liz Cheney if you want. Also, down under sources in the video description, there's the whole CNN State of the Union program, but you might have to go through some hoops to actually watch it with like a cable provider or creating an account, or I can't remember. But anyway, it's not as good as Meet the Press and CBS News Face the Nation, both of whom provide the full episodes free on their YouTube channels, or NBC News YouTube channel has Meet the Press, but I put links down in the video description to watch those whole programs if you want, and you can decide whether I picked out the right clips and given you the right commentary. But this next interview question is even worse. Well, this is what I promised you earlier when I was talking about the bias on Fox News Sunday and Shannon Bream's interviews. First, she had on a Democratic senator. Then she had on Senator Tim Scott. Didn't ask him at all about Trump's wrongdoing, his $350+ million verdict, or anything like that. And she did ask him like about mean things that Nikki Haley was saying about Trump, or no, mean things Trump was saying about Nikki Haley. Sorry, but the next guest, the third newsmaker interview that Shannon Bream had, was with New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has endorsed Nikki Haley and is on the program as a Nikki Haley surrogate. And so the question Shannon Bream asks him is about, isn't Nikki Haley being mean to Trump hurting her favorability ratings? And she's almost like asking questions for Trump to one of Nikki Haley's main surrogates and supporters. But what's funny about this clip is I told you how Shannon Bream did not bring up the Trump legal troubles in any of her interviews, but Governor Chris Sununu does bring it up in his answer to the bogus bias question from Shannon Bream. And she immediately pushes back on that, as you'll see over in this clip.
There is also this issue of all the polling has shown that the governor's unfavorability has ticked up. Her favorability has ticked down. the last couple of months. One analyst puts it this way. We see a significant dip in favorability and rise in unfavorability that seems to correspond with her increasing attacks on Trump. This would seem to indicate that in South Carolina, as apparently in the nation as a whole, that the Republican Party is very much Trump's party. Is there room for Nikki Haley in a party that most analysts think now belongs to Donald Trump?
Oh, well, absolutely. So let's look at South Carolina. They traditionally have a very low voter turnout. So a lot of the opportunity that Nikki has is talking to those Republican voters, talking even to some of those independent voters that are more conservative but typically stay on the sidelines and getting them out to vote. So there's a lot of margin for improvement there to get the new voter out. And that, I think that's where Nikki's team has really been hitting the ground and having some success. The polls don't always show that those types of numbers. I mean, the polls right in New Hampshire had Nikki down by 20, the day before the primary, and she, closed it to about 10 points. So you can't just look at the polls. It's really, this is all decided at the voter box. And again, 2-3 states do not dictate the nominee for president for everybody else. To say that, well, we're just going to look at a few 100,000 folks and they're going to tell us who our nominee should be for the entire party, for the entire country. No, that's not the way it should work. You got to take this at least through Super Tuesday and start kind of showing, with Trump's most recent comments overseas on Putin, that is undoubtedly going to hurt him. Those are un-American comments. They really are. The fact that she's raising money and spending money on a campaign, he's spending all of his money right now, at least 50 to 60 million on his legal fees. So where are the resources going to come from? The RNC itself has a record low amount of cash on hand because of his leadership and his type of message. You need everybody to get in here. If you don't get those suburban moms back, you don't get some of those young voters back, you cannot win in November, and that's what this is about.
Let me ask you, though, do you think all of those legal cases are legit, nonpartisan, apolitical cases against him?
No, I don't, but that doesn't matter. He's still going to have to spend $50 to $100 million defending himself. That's kind of the point, that whether it's legitimate or not doesn't matter. He's got this chaos that surrounds him. It absolutely does, and will keep surrounding him if he were to become president, right? So nothing is going to ultimately get done. So whether you buy off on them or not really doesn't matter. The fact is they are his chaos, and he's got to handle it.
Okay, so let me ask.
Chaos surrounds him. It's like the old Nikki Haley line, like chaos follows him. No, he he is the one. And that was, like I said, a totally bogus follow-up question. Like Chris Sununu, governor of New Hampshire, briefly mentions how Trump has legal troubles, and Shannon Bream, apparently the Trump surrogate, as most of the people on Fox News are these days, since he's the likely, almost, 99% likely to be the Republican nominee. And Fox News was created to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, as outlined in the book, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, that's right over there, which you can read yourself. Roger Ailes created it to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party when Richard Nixon had to resign because he didn't have his own propaganda outlet. And Trump's going to show how he and Roger Stone are going to vindicate the Richard Nixon, the Richard Nixon model of the presidency, I guess. Like, I am a crook, but I'm going to say I'm not a crook, I guess. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent there, but that was kind of bogus how Shannon Bream's only problem with that interview was, maybe Fox News viewers are going to hear that Trump did something wrong and he's being held accountable by the legal system. No, legal system bad, legal system partisan. I mean, except for, America's crime wave when we're being too soft on the criminals, but when Trump's the criminal, it's a whole, anyway. Talk about your two-tiered legal systems or whatever. But anyway, that is the last clip that's actually on my main topic. But I have two more clips I want to show you. One is a newsmaker interview from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they had Nikki Haley on, but didn't really ask her about Trump's legal troubles. And then they had on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, didn't really discuss it there either. So instead of having a clip on my main topic, I wanted to show you this 2.5-minute clip of Charlamagne the God talking to Jon Karl, basically talking about thinks he's worried about Biden and thinks he's worried about Trump. And the Trump things are so much worse, like end of our democracy worse. And then I'm going to show you how that clip turned out on the Fox News program, supposedly straight news program, America's Newsroom this morning. Guess which part of it made it to Fox News? Not the part about the danger of Donald Trump, but first here's the 2.5-minute clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
What's your sense? How engaged, how much is your audience paying attention to this race?
My audience, I feel like my audience is America. And when I'm out and about, just, walking in the street, people are calling into the radio station, like nobody is inspired, by the upcoming election. Like, like nobody wants to see the rematch between, Biden and Trump. And that's what makes me feel like the couch is going to win.
Why?
This is the first time in my life when people say things like, this person is a threat to democracy. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true. And it's mind-boggling to me that, nobody is taking it as serious as I feel like they should. Like, we watched an attempted coup of this country happen on January 6th. And everybody's acting like it was just a bunch of people, wilding at spring break, down in Florida. Yeah. Like, we literally watched, people try to overthrow the government because they didn't like the results of an election led by a former, president. If that doesn't cause a sense of urgency in people, I don't know what will.
Biden does make that an issue over and over again. He constantly talks about that. Why is it not resonating?
Well, he's just an uninspiring candidate. Like, there's nothing about, Joe Biden that makes you want to listen to him. That's why he should be leaning on, his vice president, Kamala Harris, who's way more charismatic than him. He should be leaning on, other surrogates like, Gavin Newsom or, Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Like, he should be leaning on people who are more inspiring than him, who are more charismatic than him, and he should just be, I guess, if you want to call it, the brains of the operation behind the scenes. Like, that sounds crazy that we're saying that about a president of the United States of America, but he has no main character energy at all. None.
And what is that? Is that age? Is it the way he is? Why do you? What's the problem?
I don't think it has anything to do with age. I think it has just everything to do with him. Like, Donald Trump is 3 years younger than President Biden, but he just comes off a lot more youthful. He comes off, like he has a lot more energy. And I always say this about them. Donald Trump seems more sincere about his lies than Joe Biden does about his truth.
And if you're wondering what part of that got into the Fox News cycle, or I saw a very brief clip of that played over and over again on Fox News today when I was watching their programs, and it wasn't the part about Trump seeming more sincere about his lies than Biden is about the truth. It wasn't about Trump being a threat to democracy. It was like two clips cut into like the 20 seconds. Well, it's even less than 20 seconds. You can see from the supposedly straight news program, America's Newsroom on Fox News this morning over here.
Well, he's just an uninspiring candidate. Like, there's nothing about, Joe Biden that makes you want to listen to him. That sounds crazy that we're saying that about a president of the United States of America, but he has no main character energy at all.
Growing criticism on the left over President Biden's age and electability. Want to bring in.
So, yeah, there you see how that 2.5 minutes from Charlamagne the God became the 20 seconds or less on Fox News, played over and over again about Trump not being inspiring and not having main character energy, whatever that is. But anyway, that is the last newsmaker clip I want to show you. I do have a bonus Cheech and Chong the Kittens clip to show you, but I also have a sad Cheech and Chong the Kittens story to share with you before that. Right now I am broadcasting this program partially using this MacBook Pro right here. I'm lifting up for the camera. And last Tuesday morning, Cheech, who for some reason really likes chewing on plastic, came up to this corner of the MacBook Pro here and bit it. He bit the screen on my MacBook Pro, and it stopped working. And I had to, luckily I have Apple Care and all that, but I had to take it in and lose my MacBook for like 3 days because for some reason Cheech the kitten likes to bite plastic, and that includes the corner of my screen. And whatever, it was kind of traumatic, but it only cost me like $100 because of the Apple Care, but still, it's just one of the things you have to go through in order to have kittens like Cheech and Chong. But they also do some cute things, and that's the final clip I'm going to show you here. Is I call this the Cheech and Chong Saltburn clip, because one of the things they like to do is go into the shower after someone's taken a shower and lick up the bath water and like Saltburn mode or whatever. And here I have, they also like to play with the drops of water coming down from the shower head, as you'll see in my bonus Cheech and Chong clip to end the program today over here. And there you go. That finishes the program. I appreciate all of you who showed up for the live stream. I appreciate my recorded show viewers. If you want to comment on the clips I picked out and my media criticism and political commentary, I will be back every Monday all the way through the election and the certification of the election on January 6, 2025, and even through the inauguration, so we can see who actually shows up and gets inaugurated. It's like an up in the air question all the way through January 20th, I guess. But so yeah, I will be here for almost a year doing these Monday media mix-ups. I hope you will continue to join me and leave your comments and thumbs up and subscribe to the videos. And sometime in the next year, I'll talk about what I might be doing with the channel after I don't do weekly live streams anymore. But anyway, I might have some other reason to upload a video in the next week. Otherwise, I'll see you next Monday and every Monday for almost a year. And anyway, until then, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.